So it's now my pleasure to welcome Cathy Foley, the former Chief Scientist of Australia and the President-elect of the Australian Academy of Technological Sciences and Engineering. Cathy, thanks for joining us.
I'll just wait for my slides to come up. But thanks so much, David, for that introduction. And also, thank you for inviting me to come and speak to you at the Chicago Quantum Exchange. I didn't expect to be first speaker, so it's a little bit overwhelming. It's pretty exciting actually to be in this city, apart from the fact it's where my daughter-in-law was born, so I've got a good connection there. But it's also deliberately branded itself as a quantum capital. And it's got Argonne, Fermilab, the University of Chicago, and all these other universities, and now the Illinois Quantum and Microelectronics Park. And it's driving this new economy. In fact, you've got a governor who's just given it the greatest sales pitch ever, and I'm very jealous. And it's something which I think is just going to be accelerating from here. When I began my career, and I actually just started it up and learning about quantum. It's 52 years ago that I first started learning about it. Quantum was a word that needed explanation. Now it's a word that government, budgets, corporate boardrooms, and community conversations, and as you see, even your governor, are even talking about. And in fact, even in some taxi drivers around Australia, they are talking about it having been seen as a very important part of news, so front page newspapers, headlines in TV. And we have reached a quantum inflection point where quantum is moving from the promise to productivity. And I think we can say that we now have a global quantum industry, and it's here now. Many countries worldwide are investing heavily in quantum, as you can see here. This year alone, there have been many announcements. Japan is going nuts with its $7 billion of investment. And this is what we see as what is labelled as quantum. But in Australia, there's also a hidden quantum investment where existing funding schemes have quantum as a priority area. And if you add that up, it's $8 billion for the taking. And I'm sure this is happening in other countries as well. Worldwide, and sorry about this awful slide, but I'm not great at making slides, and I have to do it all myself now. I'm officially a nobody. But anyway, worldwide public investment has surged beyond $44 billion, and that's US, with more than 20 national strategies in play. That's for different countries. Private investment topped $2 billion in 2024, and it's generating $700 million in annual revenue already, and it's on track to exceed $1 billion this year. Major corporations such as Intel, Google, IBM, Microsoft, and AWS are competing fiercely, while smaller firms commercialising sensors, cryptographic tools, and photonics are there, as well as some amazing quantum computing startups. I think you can hardly call them startups anymore, but like PsiQuantum, Dirac, IonQ, and Inflection. And they're giving the big guys a real run for their money. There's also more happening. Singapore has built business collaboration hubs. The UK is investing about £6 million in 5 quantum hubs. Europe's quantum flagship links hundreds of companies, and Australia is all in. This isn't just a scientific field anymore, even though we are celebrating 100 years of physics. It's an industry with a pipeline, standards, and global supply chains forming before our eyes. Globally, we see integration with quantum combined with semiconductors, photonics, AI, and supercomputing. We see infrastructure, nations racing to build fabs, cryogenic facilities, and supply chains. We see interdependence, as none of us can build the entire stack alone. The US leads with several bold state-based initiatives. We've got the Illinois Block Tech Hub and the $5 million, I can never say this, it's a terrible acronym, I have to say, David, IQMP, which is, you've got to work out something better there. It doesn't roll off the tongue. Anyway, Colorado's Elevate Quantum Hub, New York's $300 million Quantum Research Centre, and Maryland's INQ Corridor. And for Australia, we have had a different approach. We're the country the size of mainland USA, but we have the population of Shanghai, pretty small. And we can't afford to have internal competition. So the quantum community clubbed together. And as a result, Australia's approach is different. We have national coordination first and state competition second. A single national quantum strategy launched in 2023 provides the frame that states align under, and with each state having a different focus and you could say a different flavour. It's a model built on trust and collaboration, and I am glad to say it's working. We have built on the Australian Research Council's investment of 14 centres of excellence, well-funded, long-term programs backing the science, both fundamental and more recently applied, over the last 25 years. Over 50 quantum businesses, which for a country our size, have started just in the last 5 years with 26 research organisations. And the quantum workforce ranking 5th in the world despite Australia's 55th population size. We stood up a national quantum growth centre, Quantum Australia, to champion the Australian quantum industry, creating a pipeline of new ventures, diverse talent, real-world use cases and partnerships. It's bridging that critical gap between world-class research and commercial success, coordinating efforts across the research sector and translating the science into real-world applications, supporting companies to be globally competitive. For example, we have the need for development of an ecosystem, and I need to add on to there the actual legal side, which you've inspired me, David, with what you've done here. I think that's really exciting, and I've written it down on the back of my notes to go and look that up. But also, it's something where we have had to bring together the commercial bridges strategic investment. So what we've done is integrated the policy in the Commonwealth. So instead of what was, I'm very excited to see a quantum branch in the Department of Industry, Science and Resources, which is like the US Department of Commerce. Even though it was great branding, Q branch, we actually merged that in with the critical tech. So we've got semiconductors, photonics, and quantum all coming together. We've had our some anchor investment, which is, for example, the Quantum $1 billion investment by the Australian government. And I must let you know that Australia never does that normally. And then also we are building a whole new city near the Western Sydney Airport, which is to the sort of west of Sydney, Bondi Beach, quite some way. And with that, we are building a packaging facility, which is there, and a whole new city, which we hope you'll come and set up your businesses there. We're also beginning to build foundries in novel materials areas, such as the Diamond Foundry in Victoria. But we have to remember that this is not a linear process. Oh, and we need supply chains too, by the way. What I want to do is go to this quote of David Suzuki, because we always think that if science does, that it all happens really easily. Science does not progress in an easy, linear fashion. It's not like you have an idea, you set up an experiment, you prove your theory, and then cure cancer. We all know it never works that way. So if you look at the Australian development of Wi-Fi, it was mapped by a champion, Bob Frater. And as you can see, it's far from linear. It took the full ecosystem to develop it. But at a stage in the 2000s, it ended up being commercialised here in the USA, as Australia didn't have that ecosystem needed to support it. For quantum, our Australian ecosystem grew because community came first, not bureaucracy. An informal breakfast chat back in 2018 at the Australian Institute of Physics Congress in Perth initiated a 2019 CSIRO workshop, and that led to the Quantum Roadmap, the Sydney Quantum Academy, and eventually the National Quantum Strategy. And at that time, we had less than a handful of quantum businesses, and we were seen as fragmented and disorganised. The researchers saw it was time for the science research organisation or groups to become an industry. and to get our act together and create a roadmap that provided the value proposition. And I can say the rest is history. But that grassroots collaboration has been our secret sauce. But to have an industry, you need market pull. Someone has to buy this stuff. And in December 2021, an article in an email newsletter, Quantum Insider, piqued my interest in how quantum could impact sport. So I got in touch with the chief scientist at the Australian Institute of Sport, and we worked to get support to hold the first quantum meets in August the following year. Yes, quantum meets sport. You heard that right. We had 70 people attend, self-funded. We got the venue for free. We scrounged for catering. It was super bad coffee and really soggy sandwiches. We brought together the quantum researchers, quantum startups, the businesses, the Olympic and Paralympic athletes, the sports industry, the trainers, the managers, and the sports doctors. We wrote a report outlining, there's a report, outlining how quantum technology could impact the sports industry, and a group of us even pitched quantum to the Brisbane Olympic and Paralympic Games, which will be held in 2032. And their chair and CEO were listening. And we also had, complete with our mascot, Q-Bit, we even had some merch. I actually made the soft toy there. And in 2 months later, we had $5 million investment from the Queensland government and a call for projects. And they were so impressed with the quality of the projects and the opportunities they presented, they funded $6.5 million worth of projects. I have to say that's the fastest money I have ever raised. We have continued this series with 12 run in Australia, and there are more to come. We even ran 4 workshops in New Zealand this year. And we've had sessions on finance, energy, health, defence, space, decarbonisation, government, even agriculture, because quantum will impact every industry. The format is transformational. And straightforward. We use a sort of a speed dating style of workshop where industry problems meet quantum solutions and funding pathways. And the aim is to learn to talk the same language and understand what intractable problems quantum can help solve for an industry sector, and start the process of the broader industry sectors falling in love with quantum. It's about turning could into how. And as a result, new businesses have started and many new projects funded. Each workshop building trust and literacy. And I'm seeing quantum being adopted quickly in so many places. And I'll give you some examples. You may have seen in the newspapers just a week or two ago in finance, HSBC, a Hong Kong-based bank, 2 weeks ago reported using quantum optimization for predicting probability of winning trades with a 34% uplift against classical methods. And the Reserve Bank of Australia, and that is not me, we often get it mistaken, the Reserve Bank of Australia raising the need for banks in Australia to actually be quantum ready for post-quantum cryptography era. Resources and energy using quantum sensing for mineral exploration and methane monitoring, central to our zero emission plans, not to mention the opportunities for energy grid and balancing. And we've heard already about health and biotech, and we're looking at quantum simulations for molecular design. Defence and navigation are all in, for example, having quantum brilliance hardware on the Pawsey supercomputer in Perth and at Oak Ridge in the US. There is also another perspective of why quantum industry development is important, especially for Australia. Australia's commitment to reduce emissions by 43% by 2030, and actually 63 and 70% by 2035, and reach net zero by 2050, means that we must decarbonise by 17 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent each year. Now that's a 40% faster than we've ever done before. And yes, quantum will have an impact on achieving that. But there is another issue for Australia. Australia, this is from the Harvard Economic Complexity Index. Australia's is a resources exporter, and our prosperity is ridden on the wave of, for the last 40 years of being an exporter of fossil fuels. The global transition to net zero emissions means we will have to have an export revenue hole of up to $250 billion by 2050, and we need new industries to fill that gap. And in the past, Australia has had some deep tech inventions, such as, believe it or not, solar panels and Wi-Fi, but we didn't capitalise them in the 1980s and the early 2000s. So what to do? Well, I always go looking for inspiration from pretty smart people, and I thought, let's go and talk to Einstein, because he said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Now, one of the things I have to do, because I don't have a whole team behind me, is do my own fact checking. And I actually found out that he never said that. This is fake news. So I went to another more recent philosopher, your Dr. Phil, and he said, if you're going to do different, you've got to be different. And that's what Australia is doing. Quantum won't replace fossil fuel exports entirely, but it can contribute 65 to $100 billion in new industries by 2050, helping to fill the export gap, and that's just in Australia. Quantum is a new industry for Australia, and even the press is saying that, so we're pretty hooked in there. And as I mentioned, private investment in quantum exceeded $2 billion last year, with revenues $700 million, surpassing $1 billion this year to be expected. And governments in 20 plus countries have named quantum a critical technology and boosted its public funding, in some cases by 50%. The UK launched those 5 quantum hubs, and the EU quantum flagship has €1 billion to spend and is underway, and Singapore is building that cross-sector use cases, and the US NQI remains the largest public investment globally. So in this context, Australia is small but mighty. It's exporting talent and technology such as Silicon Quantum Computer, PsiQuantum, Dirac, Q-Control, Quantum Brilliance, Quintessence Labs. Just by the way, the founder of Quintessence Labs, Vikram Sharma, just won the Prime Minister's Prize for Science Innovation last night. Well, it's actually tonight, but Australia's a day ahead. And our companies are present on every continent. And Chicago has become a natural anchor for them, the start of the Trans-Pacific Quantum Corridor. The Australia-US alliance is strong. Our quantum partnership is deep and personal. Australian research underpins PsiQuantum's work here in Illinois. Dirac has joined IQMP. Q-Control supports Lockheed Martin and DARPA, as does Silicon Quantum Computer, and Quantum Brilliance hardware is at Oak Ridge National Lab. These are proof points of trust. They show that trusted alliances can scale innovation faster than solo nations can. And I think I can say that Australia has established itself as a trusted global partner in quantum, driven by its early leadership in quantum science diplomacy, and evident in a growing network of international initiatives that include these lists here: the Multilateral Dialogue of Quantum and Quantum Development Group, the OECD Global Forum on Technology, NATO's Transatlantic Quantum Community, and the International Quantum Standards Development, which I'm going to their Copenhagen meeting next week. Our collaboration with like-minded partners across government, industry and academia is a clear signal we are deeply committed to advancing quantum technologies in line with our shared values and strategic interests. Under the US AUKUS, which is Australia, UK and US coming together under Pillar 2, we now have a framework for shared infrastructure, standards and talent. The export control between the UK, US and Australia looks like one huge domestic market. And let's extend that beyond defence to include finance, health and climate. Imagine shared testbeds between IQMP and Australia, and joint standard teams between NIST, NMI and Australian standards. However, we still have some common challenges: infrastructure gaps and duplicated investment, need for international standards before scaling, government procurement coordination, visa and talent mobility for brain circulation. So let's agree on 3 principles. Let's compete on applications, but cooperate on infrastructure. Let's have open hardware and competitive software. Let's have sovereign capability without isolation. The quantum race mustn't be about who gets there first. It's about who builds a system that works for everyone. Quantum has the potential to impact every industry sector and every person. And I have to say, I love the McKinsey report that said quantum computing might just save the planet. Now that really satisfies my Catholic guilt and need to save the world, so I'm really pleased to see that. To do this, we compete where it counts and we collaborate where it matters. The question isn't how we compete with allies, it's how we maintain interoperability while celebrating diversity of approaches. Now, I'm going to go on to some local Australian history, since US history seems to be all over the world at the moment. I thought it's our turn to have a bit of a place in the sun. On the 11th of November, it's 50 years since the then Australian Prime Minister Gough Whitlam, who's that guy there, who was dismissed during a constitutional crisis, said that we must maintain the rage. Quantum has had its moment of discovery and its first wave of investment. We can't afford to expect the invisible hand of the market to take quantum to the next level. Now we must maintain the rage to build, integrate, and deliver value. We must hold on to our nerve and push through. So let's create a quantum infrastructure corridor between Chicago and Australia, a standard sprint to align benchmarks, a talent exchange through the CQE, or the Chicago Quantum Exchange, and the Sydney Quantum Academy, and a Quantum Meets International series linking ecosystem workshops across Australia and the US, and what the heck, let's go over to the whole world. When we look back in 2035, I hope we'll say quantum didn't divide the world into haves and have-nots. It connected us to build a smarter, fairer, more sustainable planet. Australia is ready. I think Chicago is ready. And the question is, can we build this together? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you very much, Cathy. We have time for a few questions.
We have just a few minutes for sure.
Good morning, everyone. This is Avinash Ravinuthala. I'm from India. As we speak about the investments coming over to Australia from Chicago, good luck to you. And one important question I have, as we see, there are a lot of incubations happening globally, facilitating the quantum computing, communications, etc. So what is the future plan for Australia to incubate more universities or students, make them ready for the futuristic quantum development?
So at the moment, one of the main things we're trying to do is make sure we have quantum courses being taught, and there's a whole range of them, from actual masters in quantum science through to developing our what we call VET, vocational education and training, which is the technical staff who are actually going to do the building and the making and the maintaining of any quantum system, as well as making sure that we're developing the ability, but not just the hardware, but the software side as well. So there's a strong coordination across the universities, but I haven't, and states. We have states in Australia like the US has, but what we're trying to do is we've got Sydney Quantum Academy, which is for new state. We're trying to set those up around the country and have them all linked together. Queensland has its Quantum Academy, and I just saw that Western Australia, which is sort of like right on the other side of the country, is doing the same thing. So the trick, though, is trying to get everybody to play nice and to realise it's not competing. Most people have never even heard of Western Australia or Tasmania or the states of Australia. They just see Australia as one place. And so trying to get that recognition that if we're in part of a global network, we've actually got to be coordinated and connected internally, and making sure that we get the funding that's needed, which is not always easy in this tight fiscal situation we have, I think, in many countries at the moment. So making the case and showing that the industry is there that needs the workforce. We've identified we need 16,000 people working in quantum industries by 2035. So where are they going to come from is the big question. And this is an issue, I think, across all countries, is where are we going to get our skilled workforce? And that is a really big incentive for government.
Cathy, thank you very much. And I think now we're going to take our break. Let's thank Cathy again.